We live on a planet seemingly designed to overwhelm us with one concern after another. Trying to control our anxiety levels can, on the face of it, seem like one of the biggest challenges we face in these modern times. How do we guard ourselves emotionally and stop stress and anxiety levels going through the roof? Well, in this video, I'm going to be taking you through some of the main things I've learned from my 13 years seeing clients one-to-one as a mind coach and anxiety therapist about how we get our anxiety levels down and keep them low no matter what life might throw at us. Before we get too far into this, I just want to clear one thing up. If you follow this channel, you might have come across videos of me talking about how anxiety is not something that needs to be managed like an ongoing condition. Anxiety is an emotion, and as such is perfectly natural and shouldn't be referred to in the way we might refer to an illness or a disease. It's my firm belief, based on my experience with clients, that it's the perceived need to manage our ongoing anxiety issues that actually causes the majority of our anxiety. So you might then be a little puzzled to see me post a video about managing anxiety. Well, allow me to clarify. This video is not dealing so much with our fear of anxiety itself, also known as second fear. It's explaining how we manage our normal, natural, everyday anxiety levels. We want to make sure that when faced with something that feels perfectly appropriate to get anxious about, we don't then allow that anxiety to take us over and send us into a full-on fight or flight mode. So perhaps the first point to make here is that we're not managing anxiety because it's an illness. It isn't. We're managing anxiety because we should, as a healthy human being, expect to feel anxious to some degree every single day. It's worth understanding how we get control of this, so that even when life throws us something huge, we don't exacerbate the problem by initiating a more severe anxiety response than is necessary. When life throws us a challenge, be it major or minor, our mind will do an unconscious assessment of resources. A part of our thinking asks itself the question, do I have the resources to deal with this particular challenge? Now, this is happening dozens and dozens of times every day without us even realizing as we go about living our life. Now, of course, most of the time, the answer will be yes. Can I send this email? Yes. Can I take the rubbish out? Yes. Can I make lunch? Yes. As long as it doesn't involve the air fryer, which is frankly a mystery to me. These questions get asked and answered in an instant, outside of our conscious awareness and with minimal or zero emotional impact. However, if the challenge at hand seems to be more than we have the resources to handle, then we might find ourselves entering a state of fight or flight as our system initiates an adrenalized response designed to tap into a greater level of resources. And the challenge doesn't necessarily have to be a physical one to fire up this response. Unfortunately, our brain hasn't evolved much beyond where it was when we were living in caves fighting for every scrap of food. So even the idea of a difficult conversation at work might see us having a physical reaction to that thought, even though the situation doesn't demand physical action. This fight or flight state, the increase in our heart and breathing rate, the tension in our muscles, sweating, stomach churning, all these things can potentially create anxieties of their own. This is why we want to minimize the amount of times we enter that state, so that we can largely just experience whatever anxiety is appropriate to focus our attention on the task at hand and no more. So how do we manage this response and minimize the possibility of going into an unnecessarily high anxiety state? Well, there are three factors your mind will directly take into account when deciding whether or not you have the resources to deal with the current situation. And I'm going to go through these now one at a time, and as we go, I'm going to talk about how we mitigate the impact of these three particular metrics and avoid triggering any fight or flight state. Before I do that though, if you're getting something from this episode, then please hit that thumbs up button and share the video to help others. Also, please consider subscribing to the channel as I put up content every week designed to help reduce and control anxiety. And now there's also a membership area of the channel where for just £9 a month, you get access to more than 100 extra videos, including my full Clear Your Head Anxiety Relief Program and weekly exclusive live streams with me. But now, one at a time, let's run through those three metrics that dictate how likely we are to go into a state of high anxiety. The first thing our mind takes into consideration is how big the challenge we are currently facing actually is. Does it look easy to traverse, or are we seemingly facing the mother of all mountains? It's not uncommon for things we haven't done before or things we've faced and found overwhelming to look particularly challenging at this point. However, we can shift our perception of the challenge at hand by doing a few simple cognitive amendments. Firstly, recognize whether or not we're looking at a single task or at multiple tasks. It's not uncommon for us to group together the tasks we have ahead of us and as a result feel overwhelmed by the sum of them all. For example, facing an entire day at work might seem like more than we feel we have the energy for, but perhaps if we broke it down to the component elements of getting to work, then taking one task at a time, the next single thing we have to do might not seem so insurmountable. In truth, we only ever have one task ahead of us, and most of the time, one thing at a time seems pretty achievable. Also, if the challenge is one we haven't done before, then we can remind ourselves that we have done a lot of things for the first time before, and many of them then became commonplace and something we no longer regard as much of a challenge at all. For example, our first day at school, our first kiss, our first day at the new job. All these things felt quite daunting initially, but we quickly made them fairly ordinary things that we then went on to do regularly without too much thought or concern. And if the presenting challenge is something we've struggled with before, then why not put our focus on the simple truth that no matter how difficult it felt the first time round, we did survive the encounter and we're still around to tell the tale. So nothing too bad is going to happen if we take this on again, and maybe we might even have learnt from the last time and have the right to expect a slightly better outcome. The second factor that your mind takes into account when assessing whether to hit the high anxiety button or not is how good you are at facing challenges. Yeah, this one is all about our own self-esteem. We might perceive the challenge ahead to be on the face of it fairly manageable, but if we don't think we're worth much, we might still doubt our ability to cope with it. When it comes to self-esteem, it's always worth remembering that we're not born doubting our own self-worth. That idea comes from some form of experiential learning. Maybe we messed up in the past. Maybe we've fallen short more often than we can easily ignore. Or, more likely, maybe we've just adopted the opinion of someone else and their judgment of us at some key point in our life. Understanding why we feel the way we do about ourselves can put us in a good position to invalidate that belief and go a long way towards changing it. But all in all, it's worth recognizing that our own opinion of ourselves will very often come from a position of negative bias. And what I mean by this is that when we view others, we see only their highlights, the bits of them that they want us to see. Whereas the perspective we have on our own endeavors includes all of our behind-the-scenes mistakes and outtakes. We're privy to every time we fell short or tried something that went nowhere, but we only see the completed version of others' efforts. It's no wonder we don't seem to measure up so well. So always remind yourself that you're achieving more than you credit yourself with. You're doing better than you realize, and you're continuing to learn and grow with every step, even those steps that ultimately turn out to be in the wrong direction. Finally, for this one, a practical step you can take is that thing I'm always talking about. Maintain a positive self-talk. Too many of us use our internal monologue to self-castigate or chastise ourselves for our shortcomings. But if we beat ourselves up, then we just end up beaten. We don't take the next step forward by telling ourselves we haven't gone far enough yet. We do it best by feeling so good about the last step we took that we can't wait to take the next one. And by the way, this isn't some kind of delusional toxic positivity. It's actually being a realist. If you give yourself the credit you're due for all the very obvious, undeniable steps you take forwards every day, then you feel much better about yourself than if you focus only on the ways in which you failed. If we can shift our perspective on ourselves, then we can minimize the amount of times we feel unable to cope. Oh, and by the way, when it comes to coping, you might doubt your ability to cope with the oncoming challenge, but remind yourself that in some way, whether it involved pushing through or getting pushed over, you have in fact coped with everything that life has thrown at you so far. If you hadn't, you wouldn't still be here. Evidence suggests that you will cope with whatever is to come. The final metric in that self-assessment that decides if we go into a high anxiety response is how close to my best am I? We might regard the presenting challenge to be quite small. We might regard ourselves to be pretty damn good at dealing with life's challenges. But if we feel at a low ebb and like we're currently the very worst version of ourselves, then we might still expect to fall short, thus potentially triggering an exaggerated anxiety response. But there are a couple of things we can do to avoid that happening. Firstly, get our rest and our sleep. All of the self-assessments we do are tainted with quite heavily negative bias when we're tired and run down. Challenges look huge and we feel powerless to overcome them when we've failed to allow our mind and our body to regularly recuperate and replenish its resources. Never allow any other concerns in life to take priority over your downtime. It might feel like we need to work harder and harder to overcome life's difficulties, but in reality, we deal with things a lot better when we are regularly looking after our energy levels. Trading off your health to achieve your goals never works and will always inevitably put you on a bad road. Secondly, prioritize your own needs. I see a lot of clients who have stretched themselves too thin in terms of energy and resources simply because they're allowing themselves to be effectively taken advantage of by others in terms of where their efforts and energy might go. Being able to say no to others when you have to is not a self-centered thing to do. Don't confuse self-care as selfish. Help others when you can, but don't do it to the point that you are sacrificing your own well-being. If you fence post your physical and mental health and set good boundaries, you're much more likely to maintain your emotional well-being in terms of managing anxiety levels and feeling good about where you are emotionally. However, even if we do all the things I've listed in this video, there's another way that we might perceive ourselves to be below our best. And that is if we've started to view ourselves as having an anxiety problem. We look at the things we used to do with ease and suddenly they all seem impossible to engage with and out of bounds maybe, simply because we have anxiety. This is down to that thing I referred to at the start of this video, the second fear, the anxiety about anxiety. And to find out how we get rid of this aspect of our anxiety response, you'll want to take a look at this next video.